Hello, and welcome to the May edition of the Watch Club. I am Program Director James Sullivan with the Newburyport Documentary Film Festival. Those of you who are regular participants in the Watch Club know that what we typically do is invite the filmmaker behind a documentary feature film that's new to streaming. Well, this month we're going to do something a little bit different. We have one of the executive producers of a brand new PBS series called Iconic America, which hopefully some of you have watched the first few episodes of. It's an 8-part docuseries on icons of American culture. And so far, so good. I'm fascinated by this series. It covers a range of icons from places, destinations such as the Golden Gate Bridge and the Statue of Liberty, to more abstract ideas of American culture, like the American cowboy and the bald eagle. And the first episode was about something that's a little bit near and dear to our hearts here around the Boston area, which is Fenway Park. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Maro Chermayeff is one of the 4, I think, executive producers of the series. And she's going to be with us in just a minute. But first, what I'd like to do is just have our tech guy, Steve, show the minute-long trailer for the entire series, just for those of you who haven't. I mean, I think 3 episodes have rolled out so far, with 5 to come. So here's the trailer for Iconic America.
There are monuments throughout this country that you have to preserve.
The series is designed to show how iconic symbols have played an important part in our country's history.
We grow up and we see things and we make connections, but oftentimes we don't really know the backstory.
The history of the game is right here. The Red Sox committed the original sin of baseball. They traded Babe Ruth. They don't win a World Series for 86 years.
The Hollywood sign is such an iconic landmark. It represents dreams. It represents glamour.
This series does a wonderful job of really diving underneath and telling how they came about.
The Gadsden flag can serve multiple purposes for different groups.
I thought that no better place would exist to educate Americans about our iconic symbols than PBS. They have a real love and interest in American history.
Now it's my honor to introduce executive producer of Iconic America, Maro Chermayeff. Hi, Maro.
Oh, hi. Hi, James. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for taking the time to talk about the series. So I want to begin, if we can, by just talking about, well, you know what, we'll get to your biography in a little bit, because before, a few minutes ago when we were getting ready to start the broadcast, you told me some fun stuff that I want to get to, some Boston connections that you may have. But I think what we should do first is, if we can you just tell me about the series host, David Rubenstein, and his background, which is so impressive, obviously. Tell me a little bit about his background and his role in the creation of this series.
Well, David is such an interesting character, I'll call him, because he's actually in our series, walking the walk. Obviously he's a highly successful businessman. He's one of the founders and still very deeply involved with the Carlyle Group, and as a result is one of the wealthiest people in our country. But as an aside to that, he's a complete and crazy history buff. He was actually in the Carter administration. And so he's had his feet in Washington, and he really loves history, and he has an incredible ephemera collection. I mean, he owns a copy of the Magna Carta. He's a serious philanthropist in American history institutions and in the education of Americans in our overall history, and also interesting looking at history and how it's changed over time. So he was really interested in doing a series that kind of could delve into his own personal passions, but in a very in a new way.
He's also the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center and the University of Chicago, and I mean, so many places. It's a
Chairman of
National Gallery of Art, right?
Yeah, the Council on Foreign Relations. I
Yeah.
mean, he's he's authored numerous books.
Yeah.
He has an interviews show on Bloomberg that and on it's actually on PBS as well, where he interviews thought leaders, and he's he's a
Right.
busy guy.
He's a pretty accomplished person. Yeah.
He's a busy guy.
Right. So tell us a little bit, if you can, about your own production company, Show of Force, and how this particular docuseries, Iconic America, was developed in conjunction with David.
Well, my company based in New York with my partner, Jeff Dupre, we are, sort of a classic, nose to the grindstone documentary film production company.
Right.
We do a number of long form series and a lot of work at PBS. Jeff and myself both have a long history at PBS. I've produced American Masters, American Experiences, and we've been sort of behind some tentpole series at PBS, which are the sort of mega behemoth national programs. So we did Carrier, which was in 2005, we did a deployment with the U.S. Navy aboard an aircraft carrier and did a huge 10-hour series for PBS on that experience. We also did Circus. I did Half the Sky and a Path Appears, which were stories in partnership with Nicholas Kristof, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist for Times. So we have had a long history of doing very large and very I'll say iconic, but this is the first time we got to use the word iconic in our title, series for PBS. So when David expressed his interest in sort of digging deeper in history, we were actually connected to David by the folks at WIDA, which is the station based in Washington. And, as some people who are loyal PBS watchers know, there's an enormous amount produced at GBH in Boston, formerly WGBH.
Right.
The New York station, WNET, and the Washington station. Those are kind of what I call the motherships of PBS. So they hooked us up and they said, hey, if you want to come up with something interesting and you want to sort of marry your love of history with with storytelling and sort of boots on the ground storytelling, we're going to introduce you to these producers. And Jeff and I had the great good fortune of meeting David. So that was a couple of years ago now, because it takes a long time to make 8 hours of television.
Okay, so tell us, if you can, how the conversations went. I'm sure that, when you started brainstorming the series, you probably had a list of 50 things that could be on the, 50 things and places that could be.
Just season 1. It's just the start. We'll see.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. So, but can you tell me, like, are some of these like sort of David, I'm doing this one, like, we're doing Fenway, we're doing this one or that one, or
David grew up in Baltimore.
Yeah.
So he played ball as a kid.
Right.
So he had, I think he did have a love of baseball.
Yeah.
I think that I maybe had the real love of Fenway. And I'm like, if we're going to do a park, if we're really, obviously we're going to have to do Wrigley or we're going to have to do Fenway.
Right.
That comes the battle. And part of it also is that the park and the team in Boston and the fan base in Boston is so amazing that we sort of thought we gotta do Fenway. So that's when it really came about. But we thought about, what are these American pastimes? It's like the old days, apple pie, Chevrolet, hot dogs. What do people think our symbols are? Because we always knew we were going to talk about iconic places or symbols, but in a new way, with a spin on it, with a sense that you're learning something. So we're choosing places and things that are, uniquely American and drive the American story, but we're giving you a new way to look at these symbols, because actually they change over time. And that's true of Fenway as well. That's true of the park. Sure. It started as one thing. It's in the middle of the city, It was wildly affected by different members that were on the team and different ownerships.
Sure.
And, race and issues in Boston that were swirling around it. So we wanted every episode to have peaks and valleys that were really worth talking about. And so that was.
So some of the episodes are going to be, I don't think any of them have occurred yet other than the Fenway one aired yet.
Hollywood is episode.
Hollywood Sign. That's right. That was the second one.
Has aired, as has the Gadsden Flag. So
Right.
we're 3 in now.
Right. But so Statue of Liberty is upcoming, Golden Gate Park is upcoming. And these are places that obviously they're physical places that people can go visit or are well aware of the imagery around those places.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about the decision to include some of the more abstract, like you mentioned, baseball, hot dogs, and apple pie? Unless this is happening in the second or third season, I don't think you've done an episode on hot dogs. I know there's not one coming up.
No, but I would do an episode on the hamburger for sure. But
right. Exactly right. Yeah, actually, that's true.
The American Cowboy,
right? The Cowboy.
But these are things that are considered uniquely American. But that concept of the cowboy really speaks to the spirit and the ideas of American independence and the way west. And so whenever we were choosing things, we were choosing ways to talk about larger issues.
Sure.
But through that. So cowboy, the American bald eagle. Like, why did that become our national symbol? It's on a flag. It's on a coin. It's flying in the air. We really wanted to talk about that. Stone Mountain. We really wanted to find a way to talk about issues around race in this country and issues around monuments and whether or not monuments that speak to things that we are no longer proud to speak of, but do they have a place? Should they be removed? Should they stay? Should they be changed? Should they be contextualized? So there's a kind of a bigger story to every story we choose.
Do you want to briefly explain to viewers what Stone Mountain is? Since here in New England anyway, I'm not sure that everybody knows exactly what it is, what it's a monument to, but it's based in Georgia, right?
Stone Mountain is outside of Atlanta,
right?
And it is the largest piece of granite in the world. Mm-hmm. It is a gigantic mountain, and carved into the side now, in the spirit of Mount Rushmore, is a Confederate, a series of Confederate leaders on horseback,
right?
And they're giant. I mean, apparently, a human being could stand just in the mouth of the horse alone. So it's enormous, and you're going over the stone from the ground. I'm now losing my words, but like a ski trail, like a you know what I'm trying to say. If you're in if you're going skiing,
a little tram, like a
go up in a little tram, and you walk around in the park, and people have picnics there, and has a family park at the bottom. But in truth, it's a complete monument to the Confederacy.
Right.
It is honoring something that is is a dark spot of our own history,
right.
And it is largely in question. And it's really a dark stain at Stone Mountain, of course, because it was co-opted by the Ku Klux Klan in the 1960s and before. And they would have, they were burning effigies of crosses on top of Stone Mountain, and
right.
Saber rattling in their white uniforms.
Right.
And so it's a real question as to why does this monument remain, and how do you ignore all those historical implications and things that happened,
right? And
go and have a picnic there. So it's a really interesting dialogue. But in the sense of a stone carving, it is in the spirit of
Mount
of
Rushmore.
Mount
Right.
Rushmore. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to take a moment to say that viewers, live viewers, if you care to ask Maro a question, you are more than welcome to do so. You just have to type your question into the chat area on YouTube. And if you do that, I will do my best to get to the question and ask it of Maro. Let's do something real quick. Let's watch one more trailer. Let's watch the Fenway Park trailer if we can. Steve, can you cue that up?
On iconic America.
It's like something out of a dream, dropped right in the middle of the city.
This was our holy grail. You had to come here.
And I just go like that, and the ball would go all the way over the green monster. The Red Sox were the last team in baseball to integrate.
Because the Red Sox didn't want to integrate. The history of the game is right here.
This is my favorite place on earth.
This is Fenway Park. This stays.
So, Maro, you told me that you were raised in New York but went to Andover. And you also told me some fun stuff about your family's connections to Boston.
Right.
Your father was a graphic designer.
My father was a graphic designer, and he's no longer with us. But my uncle, who is still alive and in his mid-80s, although he seems to be about 60, Peter Chermayeff, is the architect of the Boston Aquarium. So
right.
There's and my father was the designer of the tea and the graphic designer of this, and my uncle was very involved in the creation of the mapping, the color mapping of the tea in Boston. So yeah, we're really a Boston-esque family. I did end up going to New York, but I still have a home up on the Cape, and
yeah.
Well, I mean, I want to get the accent going for you, but I don't.
I can handle that for you.
I'm a native. I'm trying.
So you said that it was you sort of. I mean, if you're going to do a ballpark, I think it's a pretty easy call, no matter where you're from, to do Fenway. But
yeah,
you did say earlier that you sort of pushed a little bit for it.
I did push for it because it's so great, and it's right in the heart of the city.
Yeah.
And the producer of this episode, Matthew Horvitz, is a massive baseball fan. I mean, the amount that he just spewed out of his head, he basically like wrote this, the script in speaking.
Right.
To me, I think there's a great story at Fenway too, because
Sure.
it was fun to tackle the sort of balance between the team, talking about the Red Sox and talking about Fenway, the park, and how they speak to each other. So that was also, a very fun conversation to have.
So I'm a Boston native who grew up on this team, and know all the painful stories about 86 years of heartache and the last 20 years of better luck. I was very pleased to see a fleeting glimpse, probably from the 60s or the 70s, of one of the billboards over the Green Monster, where there's a bunch of fans sitting on the scaffolding of the billboard, overlooking the Green Monster to look into the stadium. I am going to just go ahead and say that I did that a few times. I was one of those delinquent kids who climbed up onto the billboards behind the Green Monster when you could still do this and watch the game.
You see the games over there.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
But so I was fascinated by, we talked about this a little bit earlier before we started the broadcast, but I was fascinated by how well this episode of the series integrated the stories about the Red Sox themselves for casual baseball fans or someone who knows nothing about baseball, about all the heartbreaking losses and selling Babe Ruth and then finally coming back against the Yankees in 2004, all that stuff, but with plenty of stuff that I didn't really know about the history of the ballpark itself, which after all is the icon that we're talking about in this episode. Whether we're talking about the history of the park or the last 2 decades of renovations that have been made that we all know as Red Sox fans, but don't necessarily know how they were done. And Janet Marie Smith is the architect, and she's in the episode. So, how did you strike that balance between sort of, we got to tell some baseball stories, but we're really talking about the ballpark?
But the part about Fenway that I love too is all the things that they've held on to. They're still changing the numbers in the back. They didn't reconstruct
the scoreboard, right?
They didn't reconstruct the city. I mean, because it's so the park is oddly shaped because it sort of moved along with the shaping of where it was
built into the neighborhood, right?
So many times where it was so important that they could have really changed it, but they kind of held on to that history, and I think that has an enormous importance to the fan base. That it is the dirt and grime of the original park and all that it's been through. It's just it's not fancy. I mean, even I'm embarrassed to say as a New Yorker, in the Yankee Stadium when they moved the team to the Yankees office, it was like, everything old isn't always best new again.
Exactly right. Yeah. I always laugh when there's a Yankee broadcast because somebody really whiffed on the design of their stadium, because they put all the sort of muckety muck seats right behind home plate, where they have the opportunity to go below those stands right behind home plate to their special box seats, or the boxes where they get catering and TVs and all that. So nobody's ever sitting in those seats. You're looking at like the batter from the pitcher's perspective, and all those fans, because they are business people who have access to the boxes under the stands, they're never sitting there. So it looks like nobody's there, even though obviously the rest of the stadium is full. Anyway, in the Fenway episode, one of my favorite parts was how various of your guests, and there's tons of them crammed into an hour, just talk about the park itself as this magical place. I think it's Jackie McMullen, who's a sort of world-class sports reporter, says when you walk out from under the stands and out to your seats for the first time, it's like it's like walking into the Emerald City, I think is what she says. And then the comedian Stephen Wright, who is hilarious to begin with, no matter what he says, but he's a huge Red Sox fan, obviously, and he talks about how it's like walking into a fairy tale, which is what it feels like when you walk into Fenway, even if you've been going it like I have for 40 years.
And
so
there's some pretty dedicated, celebrity fans, Matt,
right.
Ben Affleck and Matt,
sure.
Damon, who go to games, and
Stephen King.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty it's pretty iconic when you're there, to have that that kind of feeling about the park. But I think it was also really important in the series to be able to sort of talk about things like the Curse of the Bambino. And really, make it a bit more complex. That there are darker times than just the team losing. Right. The issues with Tom Yaki and the issues of the racial or lack of racial integration of the team,
having the opportunity to sign,
and that being the real curse. Look at some of the players that they were not addressing.
Could have signed a 17-year-old Willie Mays and chose not to. Had Jackie Robinson here for a tryout, just as a show trial.
I'm very appreciative that those issues are addressed head on in the series.
Of course, right.
I mean, it's like literally David saying, is this team, was this a racist overtone in leadership? And it was like, yes. Like,
Howard Bryant is right.
Let's not question that. That's not a question.
Right.
But can people learn and change and evolve over time? Yes, hopefully they can.
Yeah, and Sam Kennedy, who is the president, I think, of the Red Sox, talks about that. He says we know that we have a history that we have to overcome with this team, and this current ownership is doing everything that they can to.
And MLB is very open. I mean, obviously they have a lot of. It was very much of a negotiation from a filmmaking perspective with that for the footage, for the material to be in the park. I mean, the ownership is separate, but the games, clearing baseball footage for those of you who are filmmakers is no fun, because it's like, it's you really have to dot your I's and cross your T's to be able to use all the things that you want to use that are under the ownership of Major League Baseball.
Right. Tell us, if you can, you told me earlier that you are coming to Fenway for something in particular in June.
I'm coming to Fenway June 25th in order to see Dead and Company. And I was told that you got to be sitting on the field, because that's where the whole experience comes in. Plus, it's
Oh,
not
sure.
exactly, it's not meant to be a sound arena in that way. So
right.
But yeah, I mean, clearly, like, Fenway is double timing. They're doing other things now besides baseball, which I had no idea. But that's what made me buy the tickets. I was like, it's at Fenway. I don't even care about seeing the Dead again.
If anybody who's watching is not a big rock and roll fan, it's Dead and Company is the sort of aftermath of the Grateful Dead, the long running hippie band that Maro is a big fan of. I learned about a half an hour ago.
I was, and I am, and obviously Jerry Garcia is no longer with us, but
right.
John Mayer has worked hard to fill his shoes, so that'll be interesting.
I've seen a bunch of shows at Fenway, and I'll tell you that the sound is actually really pretty good for a place that wasn't built for.
What section should I be sitting?
Well, if you can be on the floor, I would say definitely be sitting on the floor, because some of the sound is going to get lost if you're under one of the overhangs in the grandstand. Yeah.
But I feel like if I'm going to enjoy a Dead show, it's going to be at Fenway. That's
of
like,
course.
That
sure.
To me is like, okay,
of course.
This is a marriage I would appreciate. So I'm excited. Right. Yeah.
So the Gadsden Flag episode aired last night. It's every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday, and it airs at different times all over the country. But in the East Coast, it's at 10 p.m., which I myself am like, hitting myself with the stick to stay awake at 10 p.m.
Well, you've seen them all, right? Exactly. So, what's the next episode? The fourth one for next week.
The fourth episode for next week is the American Cowboy. That would be that, which is shot out west in Cheyenne and Wyoming. Wonderful rodeo that takes place there, and it's very funny. The key thing throughout the entire series is what a surprise David is, because he seems that he's going to be this kind of, sort of bumbling banker who is going to kind of figure his way out through these things. But very early on in the creation of the series, we're like, okay, wow, like, he's one of the funniest people I've ever spent a lot. I mean, he's very, very dry wit, but so funny. I mean, and the shows, while they're airing in a certain order, isn't necessarily the order that we made them in. Yeah. So because we, had to go different places for different reasons. So we started very, very early on, and we went to Alaska for the Congregation of the Bald Eagle, where there are like sort of 1,200 eagles in any given tree practically. And David was like, "Oh, it's a long way to come to see an eagle." You're like, yes, but we're not seeing one eagle, are we? We're seeing 5,000 eagles. Right. I think he was terrified that he was going to get eaten by a grizzly bear, which it's not out of the question. I told him not to, don't carry a bag of,
Yeah, don't walk around with your snacks hanging out of your pocket.
Exactly. But he was very willing. He's one of those people that he's very game. He'll do anything. He'll go anywhere. He'll try anything.
Sure.
He just blamed me later. Like, why am I here? It's on Smithsonian. I was like, yes, but that's a stuffed eagle. That's a taxidermy eagle. We wanted to see the real thing.
Yeah. The episodes will air through every Wednesday through sometime in June, I think, right?
No, actually, because
is there a break in between the
episodes, and after Cowboy there will be a break, and then at the end of June begins Statue of Liberty, Eagles, the Golden Gate Bridge, and Stone Mountain.
Got it. Okay, and once the episodes air live on PBS, they can be streamed on the PBS website or on the Iconic America website afterwards,
Correct. Yes, you can stream them, watch them anytime you want. And of course, as we all know, that's how most people consume their media.
Exactly.
Very few people are watching, PBS.
Appointment TV, right? Exactly.
No, I don't even think my daughter's ever watched something on a television. She's like, "What's that?" So it's like, but there's a lot of there's a lot of rebroadcasts depending on where you are based in the country as well.
Right.
So I mean, it has something like a 97.5% carriage across. So there's already some 5,400 airings of the show or something, because it re-airs, and then it re-airs in stacks and stunts, and you're watching it online, and so there's a lot of ways to see it, and all of that is clearly noted on the PBS WIDA website,
right,
for Iconic America.
Right. Maro, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about Iconic America.
Thank you for having us. It's a very fun series. Everybody that sees it is uniquely surprised by how much they learn about something they thought they knew a lot about.
I agree. So completely. That's why we asked you to come on. So thank you so much for doing it. And so I hope you have a great time at the Dead Show in a couple of next month.
There was a cage I'd be dancing in it, but I don't think they those were the old days. Those were the Red Rocks. Yeah, I was a cage dancer at Red Rocks. There's some things when you're on the wrong side of 50 that you just don't do.
I am with you. I hear you.
Now I just go and bring my own drinks in a cooler.
Right.
But I'm very excited. But I'm no more excited than I would be to see a game. But thank you so much for having me. And everybody, please tune in and watch the series, and tune in, stream in, all the different options. It was a real pleasure to work on it.
Yeah, I would imagine. Thank you so much. And we'll just take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. As always, we'll see you next month in the Watch Club.